Ramakrishna Paramahamsa's great teaching. Swami Vivekananda was his worthiest disciple. He must have done that. But his ordinary posture was very self-conscious. Rather than the spiritual people, they are constantly practicing self-abnegation and self-effacement. But the approach of Swami Vivekananda was very self-conscious, very prophetic, very powerful, very courageous. And this misleads some people and think that Vivekananda wanted our attention. Vivekananda wanted to direct our attention to the great tradition, and we are not doing justice to the tradition. And unless we can do that, we are not going to do justice to Swami Vivekananda. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Mukhopadhyay, for enlightening us with your talk, pointing out the key aspects and issues of the seminar. Now, as we approach the end of this inaugural session, we would like to request Professor Sabyasachi Bhattacharya to present his concluding observation and propose a vote of thanks. Professor Bhattacharya is the former Vice Chancellor of Vishwabharati University Shantiniketan and former Chairman Indian Council of Historical Research. He has held teaching and research position in JNU, St. Anthony's College in Oxford University, in University of Chicago, etc. His recent publications include Talking Back, the Idea of Civilization, and Rabindranath Tagore and Interpretation. Professor Bhattacharya is now associated with the Institute as Swami Vivekananda Professor of Indology and Research at the Center for Indological Studies and Research of the Institute.
Revered Swami Prabhanandaji, esteemed Swami Sarvbhutananda, Professor P.K. Mukhopadhyay, Professor Nirmala Narayan Chakravarti, assembled scholars, and the monks of the Ramakrishna order, ladies and gentlemen. Normally, I like to talk without a script, without a text to read out from, but today, because of the importance of this occasion, I thought it would be best to write up what I intend to say. So I will read out from a text. The organizers of this conference are to be congratulated for having chosen the theme Significance of the Ideas of Swami Vivekananda in the Modern Age. I congratulate the ICPR and the RMIC, the Ramakrishna Institute of Culture, because attempts are often made to represent Swami Vivekananda as the opposite of a modernizer. Knowingly or unwittingly, many commentators conceal from our view the message of modernity in Swami Vivekananda's life and work. This misrepresentation involves the underestimation of his lifelong endeavor not only to interpret the past of India to the West, but also to evaluate and to bring to India the best from the West. One has only to recall his emphasis on science as the secret of the power of the Western countries, and hence his emphasis on the inculcation of science in the Indian education system and world outlook. One recalls his frequent reference to the national unity that developed in modern Europe since the 16th century, which contrasted with the absence of national unity in India in his times. Prabhanandaji reminded us that perhaps even in our times that unity is hampered by many factors such as identity conflicts and ethnic feelings. One also recalls the numerous letters Swami Vivekananda wrote during his long sojourn in America to his disciples, the lesson he learnt in the USA, the lesson of the necessity of organization, social and political. And one also recalls Swami Vivekananda's words on the absence of the quality of rajas in India in his times as compared to contemporary Europe, where rajas powered Europe's ride on the wave of modernization to the top of the world. I surmise that Swami Vivekananda tried to put together all these ideas about modernization, which were scattered earlier in various writings and lectures, in a systematic exposition a few years before his death, in some essays he wrote for the journal Uddbodhana. In particular, I have in mind what Swamiji said about modern age and about modernity in the first article he wrote as an introduction to Uddbodhana in January 1899. This was called, as you know, The Problem of Modern India and Its Solution. And it was followed, you will recall, in March by another article, a very famous one called Vartaman Bharat, or Modern India. And Vivekananda analyzed modernity and its place in India as he envisioned India. The India, he thought, which would emerge from the ruins of the ancient past and the mockery of westernization under British rule in recent times. I would like to quote a few lines now and then as I go along. He begins his essay in January 1899 to introduce Uddbodhana with an exposition of history. And there he says that, somewhat like what Tagore said later, history in the Western sense of the term, India does not have. We do not have histories of dynasties, of rulers and kings, but we have our history in our literature, as Vivekananda put it, every line of the mass of religious literature of India, her ocean of poetry, her philosophies and various scientific works reveals to us the advance of India towards civilization. But then Vivekananda goes on to say, in course of time India fell back in the course of her advance, and hence her position of subordination and backwardness in which India is situated now. Now how did he look at this problem? He goes on to say that in the West, in his own times, he found certain qualities which India lacked. I will quote one passage. What we should have is what we have not. Perhaps what our forefathers even had not. That which the Yavanas had. Impelled by the life vibration of that is issuing forth in rapid succession from the great dynamo of Europe, the electric flow of that tremendous power, vivifying the whole world. We want that energy, that love of independence, that spirit of self-reliance, that immovable fortitude, that dexterity in action, that bond of unity of purpose, that thirst for improvement. Unquote. And he goes on to make a very significant statement. He says that we need not always harp upon our own past. There is a passage which Jawaharlal Nehru quotes a number of times, particularly in the discovery of India, where Nehru said that I learned this lesson from Swami Vivekananda, that we must remember the past, but we cannot live in the past. And here, in this article, Uddbodhana, Swami Vivekananda said, checking a little the constant looking back to the past, we want that expansive vision infinitely projected forward, and we want that intense spirit of activity, of rajas, which will flow through our every vein from head to foot. This was in Vartaman, in The Problem of Modern India, first article with Buddha, Collected Works, Volume 4, page 4 and 4. And Swamiji goes on to say that in India the quality of rajas is almost absent. And a very significant sentence. The quality of absence is, rajas is absent in India. The same is the case with sattva in the West. The one end and aim of the Uddbodhana is to help the union and intermingling of the two forces, that is to say, the Rajasic and the Sattvic. Now, as all of you, I need not remind the learned audience of this article, Vartaman Bharat. It's a very famous passage which is often quoted. That passage is Bhuliona Bharat. Now, these last rhetorical words are often quoted, but this exhortation to remember the glorious past was preceded by a searching and perhaps for him an agonizing analysis of the depth to which Bharat had fallen. It is an incisive analysis of the history of a country that fell behind many others in progress towards modernity, towards nationhood, towards scientific temper, the art of self-government. What are the things that India never had or possibly lost in course of time? This is a question that Swami Vivekananda poses. He first talks about the spirit, the absence of the spirit that promotes self-government. A very interesting passage where he looks back onto Ramarajya and he says, yes, perhaps we had Ramarajya, perhaps we had semi-divine kings, but was it all only for the good of India, or did it have any obverse side? He says, being always governed by kings of godlike nature, to whom is left the whole duty of protecting and providing for the people, they can never get any occasion for understanding the principles of self-government. So the people under divine kings do not learn self-government. Such a nation, I quote him, such a nation being entirely dependent on the king for everything and never caring to exert itself for the common good or for self-defense becomes gradually destitute of inherent energy. Vivekananda reminds readers of the American Declaration. He quotes the American Declaration. He says, look at the American Declaration, which, and he quotes just two lines, the government of the people of this country, the USA, must be by the people and for the good of the people. This was in 1899, 6 years after he himself saw the US principles of self-government, the institutions of self-government. The second point, next to self-government, the other point which I think emerges very clearly from Swamiji's writing is how he looked upon the superstitions and barbarous customs which he thought imprisoned India after the fall of Buddhism. And he says here that there was an alliance of Brahmanya power and royal power, Rajput power. And this was the period when they developed a whole mess of superstition. And I quote him again, thus this development turned the whole Aryavata into a deep and vast whirlpool of the most vicious, the most horrible, the most abominable, barbarous customs. And as the inevitable consequence of countenancing these detestable customs and superstitions, it soon lost all its own internal strength and stamina and became the weakest of the weak. What wonder that it should be broken into 1,000 pieces and fall at the mere touch of the storm of Musalman invasion, and that from the West, unquote. So the only way was, he said, to get out of this mess, to break out towards modernity. The third point, which I think emerges very clearly in Swamiji's writings on this theme, is his appreciation of the strengths of the British in the modern world. And here he talks about their national unity of purpose, a phrase that occurs several times, their ever wide-awake commercial genius, and above all, Western science, dazzling the eyes with the brilliancy of myriad suns. With great acumen, he puts the power of science before us by looking at the way it transformed India's life, everyday life. There's one passage where he says, to make it intelligible to common people like us, look how under the dominion of the English in these days of electricity, railroad and steamboat, various sentiments, manners, customs and morals are spreading all over the country with lightning speed. Nectar is coming, amrito, and along with it also poison. Good is coming as well as evil. There has been enough of angry opposition. The power of stemming this tide is not in Hindu society. He was skeptical of the power of Hindu society to resist it. And he said that the gifts of science, when you talk of science in abstract is something, but there's technology he's talking about. And then he goes on to say, everything from water filtered by machinery and drawn from hydrants, down to sugar purified with bone ash, is being quietly and freely taken by almost everyone, in spite of much show of verbal protest. Slowly and slowly, by the dint of law, many of our most cherished customs are falling off day by day. We have no power to withstand that. And why is there no power? Is truth really powerless? He quotes Satyameva Jayate, truth alone conquers. Is this divine Vedic saying false? Or is this divine saying false, or are these customs which are going the way of all flesh, are they customs which are anacharas, not acharas, which are approved? This is also, he says, a matter for serious consideration. He, of course, does not give a final judgment here, but he says it's something to think about. This Cultured Works, Volume 4, page 407. The practical wisdom Vivekananda pointed out would be to acquire scientific knowledge. And what we need, he said, is to study, independent of foreign control, different branches of modern science. We need, again he added, we need technical education and all else that may develop industries, so that men in India, instead of seeking for service, may earn enough to provide for themselves, unquote. This was the pragmatic part of Swamiji's philosophy of education, of which the ultimate philosophical purpose, no doubt, was man-making. There are many other features of modernity to which Vivekananda draws our attention. It is not my intention to make a list of them. I could have talked about his emphasis on organization and management, which he admired in USA, or again his praise of the modernity of women, Western women engaged in work outside of domesticity. But my point is not to make a shopping list of what was modernity. The object is to appreciate the extent to which Swami Vivekananda was open to modernity. At the same time, it is unnecessary to remind this learned audience. He warned against mistaking superficial westernization for genuine modernization. You'll recall towards the end of Bhattacharya Bharo, there's a passage where he says that other people's ideas do not become your own. You have to earn membership of the modern world. Does the ass in the lion's skin become the lion? And so on. Where he's mocking the Anglicization of his times, of his generation. He belonged to a class where such Anglicization was rampant. Belonged to a time when it was perhaps the hegemonic force, the spirit that ruled his Calcutta. And then finally he says that yes, it is true that this Anglicization, this westernization is not true modernity. But at the same time, have we not then anything to learn from the West? Are we perfect? Is our society entirely spotless without any flaw? Sri Ramakrishna used to say, as long as I live, so long do I learn. That man or society, I think these are very pregnant words, pregnant wisdom. That man or society which has nothing to learn is already in the jaws of death. This is what Swami said. Yes, learn we must many things from the West, but there are fears as well. So he saw nectar and poison as well in what the West brought to India. And this dilemma is something that Vivekananda articulates in a manner which to me remains relevant even in our own times. How to encounter the challenge of modernity, how to retain our traditions. It's a question that haunted us throughout our history from the Bengal Renaissance. It is a question that haunts us even today. The greatness of Swami Vivekananda was to capture this agonizing moment in his times without fudging the issue, without going for the easy and comfortable answer that the values and customs and institutions of our ancient past must prevail over all else. He did not offer that answer. He faced the question that there is modernity, there is much that is lacking, and how to make up for that. That is, I think that's the core of his approach. At the cusp of the 20th century, here was a man whom we must reread time and again to appreciate the angst of not only his times, but our own times. Perhaps the greatness of great minds is not always in the answers they provide. Sometimes they do not provide an answer, but in raising questions that remain relevant in this day and age. That was Swami Vivekananda's abiding contribution. Once again, I would like to thank for bringing back into public discourse the thoughts on modernity which we find in Swami Vivekananda. I would like to thank Swami Prabhanandaji, the Vice President of the Ramakrishna Mission, for his erudite address. I thank the learned Secretary of the ICPR, Professor Nirmalanarayan Chakravarti, who introduced to us the theme of the conference, the distinguished Professor of Philosophy, Professor P.K. Mukhopadhyay, who delivered a keynote address, and Swami Sabyasachi, who along with his colleagues, is the dynamo that moves the Ramakrishna Mission Institute of Culture. I also thank in anticipation the experts and scholars who will participate in the deliberations in the next 2 days, but in the deliberations to which laymen like me look forward with the keenest anticipation. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Bhattacharya, for enlightening us with your well-thought views. With this, we come to the end of this inaugural session of this seminar on significance of the ideas of Swami Vivekananda in the modern age. Thank you.